How do you take care of your family when food and water are running out? How do you get help when the hospitals have no electricity? And how do you tell your kids everything will be okay when rockets are raining down? On both sides of the Israel-Hamas conflict, innocent people are paying the price. Jason Lee from Save the Children joins me now in Jerusalem. Jason, we appreciate your time, knowing how busy you are. And look, we don't even want our kids here seeing what's happening where you are, and these poor children are living it. If we can just start with Gaza, where almost half the population is under the age of 18. Can you paint a picture of what life is like for them right now?
The situation in Gaza is pretty dire. And in fact, even before this latest escalation was bad, you have a situation where 80% of the population are reliant on humanitarian assistance. That's 80% of people, of the 2.4 million people living in Gaza, that need help every day just to meet basic needs, just to get food, to get water, to have somewhere to stay. Now, with this current escalation, we now have a situation that there are 275,000 people that have fled their homes and are seeking shelters in the schools. Now, these people and kids, they need access to food, water, medicines. A lot of them are injured. There's thousands of people injured. To date, we have 4,000 people injured. Now, these numbers are increasing every day. It is absolutely frightening.
So with Israel announcing a total blockade on Gaza, what does that look like? And how long before they run out of things like food, water and medicine?
Yeah, look, it's impossible to tell how much food there is in Gaza. I mean, it's very difficult to get information now, noting that access is completely closed. So no one can go in or out of Gaza. There's no electricity, which means that health centers are not functioning. There's no communication. But what I can tell you is that as of 2 days ago, the people sheltering in the schools, there was enough food for about 12 days, maybe 14 with rationing, for 150,000 people. That was 2 days ago, when there was 75,000 people in the school. Last night, there were 275,000 people. Today, there's going to be much more. The food will run out soon. Even electricity. Again, 2 days ago, the shelters had fuel for maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yesterday, it was down to 5 days. The longer we progress through this crisis, the more and more acute the food, water, medical supplies and medicines, the shortage will become. And because we're not able to enter Gaza, I can't send more teams. None of the humanitarians can get in. We can't send supplies in. So we can't restock dwindling supplies already.
I mean, so when you say the situation is dire, I mean, it almost feels like an understatement. But then on the other side, you have Hamas executing children, taking some as hostages to Gaza. I mean, that too is impossible to comprehend.
No, absolutely. As always, children pay the ultimate price for these ongoing cycles of violence. It is imperative that all sides protect civilians, especially children. Again, the horrific incidences that happened and are still ongoing must stop. All sides must immediately stop. They must de-escalate and they must protect civilians. There is never, ever a justification that children, innocent children, pay the price.
The reality is, though, Jason, and you would know this more than any of us here, is that's not going to happen. And while war is always brutal, there are rules. And one of them is to make every effort to spare the young. Why is that being ignored this time?
Fortunately, this has been one of the underlying challenges in this protracted conflict. The adherence to international law, really the protection of civilians, is critical. I think that it is incumbent for not just all sides of this conflict, but member states like Australia. What are we doing to ensure that everyone abides by their obligations to protect children? That means children, civilians should never be targeted. That means that the access to health, food, shelter, those basic rights are upheld at all times. We must ensure that civilians are protected, especially during conflict. Like we know during wars, children are more vulnerable, and this is why it's even more imperative that there must be steps taken to ensure that they're not targeted, that they're not victims of airstrikes, that they're not kidnapped, that they're not taken hostages. Civilians, children have to be protected.
Jason, how do you cope with it all? I mean, this is your job and you deal with this day in and day out, but there must be a helplessness you feel when you would have a sense of where this is going in the coming days, weeks and months, and there are so many children involved, caught up, who can't get out.
Yeah, look, this is where it's difficult, because my biggest fear is what is to come. I think we are bracing for the worst. I'm not sure if the humanitarians, the international community realizes what will happen, the humanitarian catastrophe that we're very fast hurtling towards. I'm concerned about my own teams in Gaza. Many of them are impacted. They have lost their homes. They've lost family members. They're now desperately seeking shelter. Where do they go to? I cannot imagine any parent having to think about, what do I do to keep my child alive? The sacrifices, the compromises that you make just to keep your family alive. This is what I'm mostly worried about. It is stressful for me and my teams, but for me, I am more concerned about what happens to the people, my teams, the people in Gaza, that at the moment we're not able to help because we cannot reach them. We're not able to get into Gaza. We're not even able to send supplies into Gaza. These supplies will run out soon, and what will happen to them? There are 2.4 million people living in Gaza, and half of them are children. We need to ensure that we protect them so that this situation doesn't get worse for them.
Because I think the big question for many people is where do they go when you've got the Israeli Prime Minister warning his country will, and I quote, respond like never before, and has also warned people in Gaza to get out of there now. I mean, is that even possible for those Palestinians who call it home?
Possible. I mean, Gaza is a really small place. It's 365 square kilometers. It's completely blockaded, so 2.4 million people living there. It's one of the most densely populated places on earth. The civilian population have nowhere to go. They can't cross into Israel. At the moment, they can't cross into Egypt, and they're bordered by the Mediterranean Sea. So there really is no way for them to go. Even if they're trying to flee with airstrikes and shelling, there's limited spaces that they can take shelter in. It is a hugely densely populated area. This is why it's really critical that we protect the civilians and take measures, because there really is nowhere for them to hide.
And we just hope that message is heard before it is too late. But Jason, you're doing extraordinary work over there and we really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Truly are terrifying scenes, aren't they?